Okay, welcome to Tasting Australia TV. That's a real cliche. I bought a batch of pheasants and partridges from John at Heritage Hill in Kangaroo Island. They obviously couldn't be used for Tasting Australia in April, and the good people at Kangaroo Island Stall 17 took them, Justin and Jane, and now you need to cook them for Mother's Day and support a farmer and support a producer. The pheasants are awesome. If I was Maggie Beer and I told you that, you would all agree. Well, I'm telling you that as Simon, and they're easy. So you can feed 4 people with 2 birds, 6 people with 2 birds. You can feed 2 people to a gluttonous level with 1 bird. And all you need is, we're gonna kind of do a pot roast. So you need some sausages with a high fat content. These are Barossa Fine Foods. They're chicken, used pork, whatever. Some vegetables, mirepoix carrots, one of these, what do you call that? Fennel, mushrooms, some celery, some onion or shallot, some garlic. And if you want to get all whatever, put something else in, that's fine. It'd be really awesome if you used Kangaroo Island Spirits gin, because John likes awesome. And KI needs a hand, so you got a KI bird, you got a KI gin and KI oil. They've had bushfires and now we've got travel restrictions, so help them out. And some York Peninsula lentils, which are mine. Shameful plug for my own stuff. All right, let's go. Pheasant, get it out of the plastic bag. Try and bring it up to room temperature because the bone will fight you. So if you pull it straight out of the fridge, your cook time could be 10 minutes longer. And then what you end up with is that pink patch of jelly meat that no one really likes, and the rest of the bird dry. So if you can get the bird up to temp a little bit, it'll help you immensely. Is it a boy? Is it a girl? Quite often, if the breast is really big, you've got a hen, and the breast will take exactly the same time as the leg. If it's a boy, quite often the breast is a bit smaller and the rib cage is a bit pointier. I don't know. I'm thinking this might be a boy, but we don't care. We're going to pot roast it and we're just going to give you a margin of error. All you really have to do is get the legs off. If you don't want to get the legs off, you don't have to. It just makes life easier. But it's basically just come through like a chicken. Just come through down here. There's your little dislocated hip joint, and just come down. You don't need a boning knife. You can do it with a pair of pliers, with a blunt pair of scissors. Doesn't really matter. And don't get all carried away if you miss a bit of meat or whatever. Ideally, if you pull the leg off, you're meant to pull the oyster and yada yada yada. But don't worry, just cut. And if you can't cut, just pull it off. It's fine. You end up with that, which is the frame and 2 legs. And then tuck the wings underneath, and that's to stop the wingtip burning and drying out, that's all, and to not get a mark on the breast meat. And if they don't want to stay there, well, too bad. Don't worry about it too much. Usually they will. Just check that there's not too much goop inside. It's not going to kill you, but when they're gutted, there might be a bit of liver or something in there. Doesn't matter. Leave it in if you want. All right, so that's the bird. So get that, lightly salt and pepper it, and get a pot on the stove. I don't know if you can see back here. That's a pot, that's a stove. Get it on medium heat. And these heavy base cast iron pots are great for that. If not, just use a pot and get ready to smack a lid on it. No big deal. All right. All the caveats with poultry, obviously, swap your board, wash your hands, get ready for your next round for the veggies. Doesn't really matter, to be honest, because you're cooking the whole thing. But it's good practice. All right, so mirepoix is just a fancy way of saying vegetables. It doesn't really matter how you do it. You need the shallot to actually cook, and it adds a little bit of sweetness to the dish. If I was doing this and charging you a fortune like chefs usually do for game birds, I'd probably do a cassoulet. I'd salt cure the legs, and I'd probably maybe even brine the breast and then roast that slowly on the cap for a long time, and then put these into some goose fat and, you know, confit them and shred them all off. Well, we're trying to do a one pot wonder, and you're just trying to wow your mum for Mother's Day, and you've got better things to do than faff around all day with curing stuff and cooking it in duck fat. You've got the ATO portal to deal with, and all sorts of administrative duties to pivot with if you're in the cooking industry. Right, garlic, rough cut onion, sausages. I would chop them, but you can leave them whole. It doesn't really matter. So we'll throw some in whole. I'd say, like, you know, if you want this bird to feed 4, then use a ton of sausages, because you're padding out the protein. So we're gonna say this could feed 4 if we used all of that. It's your call, work out how much you want to eat. We'll say this is 2 generous serves we're doing. So 2 pork sausages, let's leave them whole, so that the fat comes out slowly, the pork fat. A bit of the oil. Now, this whole kit will be available at KI online in the Central Market. You can order a kit to do the whole dish, or you could pop into the market and just buy the pheasant and do your version. So get the oil into the pot and start browning down the bird. I throw it in. We'll show you close up in a minute. I just want to get moving. Then we'll brown those up later and chuck those in, onion and garlic. So vegetables. Get some, I reckon 1 big mushroom will do it. And you need a fairly, not a minuscule cut, because we're gonna sort of pot roast and braise, and you're gonna lose it if it's too small. It's gonna get a bit microscopic. Carrots, for that many people, what do we reckon, about that many? These are from Bill's Organics, which is exactly opposite KI Online in the Central Market, and that's sort of the cut you want. It's kind of called pasien, peasant cut, which means I don't really give a stuff how you cut it. Celery, maybe a couple of stalks. I'll bring the bird over so you can see. I'm just trying to get some colour onto the leg, and it's happening slowly because I've got it on a low heat. And the breast, colour. And just try and get as many sides browned as you can. It's not really rocket science. It's just going to push a little bit of flavour into the dish, and then we're going to deglaze, which means throw a bucket full of alcohol in there. All right, so celery. Now, flavours that go nicely: orange with pheasant. The juice isn't really going to do anything for you, so just save the orange and juice it out later. But we're chasing a bit of zest, a bit of essential oils. These game birds, pheasant is probably the least challenging game bird you're ever going to eat. It's like a really compact chicken, I guess. So we don't need to clean up the flavour. Like a lot of game birds, you got massive flavours and you're trying to clean them up. Not the case here. It's a clean tasting bird. If you've never had a pheasant, I think you've got to try one. You could also buy a pheasant from Barossa Chooks. I think the Barossa's Farmers Market's going to be open soon. I'm going to add juniper. And I don't have any, so I'm not going to. Bay leaf, that's another decent aromatic. Let's have a look at these pheasants again, see how they're sealing. We don't have to have juniper. There's juniper in the gin. Those flavours will come through. If you don't want to use gin, just use a little bit of white wine or whatever you want. You need a little bit of acid in there, that's all. All right, this is almost where I need it. And now we could probably throw a bit of we could probably take the bird out and seal up all of the onions and whatever, but I'll give it a little bit longer just to brown up more, a bit more texture. Meanwhile, get your oven on, get it to about 180, should do it. We forgot the fennel. So we're on 11 minutes. Oh, just referring to the Bible, Maggie Beer's book. If you want to know how to cook a pheasant, you're not meant to see that. It's page 200 and I haven't got my glasses on. 293 is a beautiful picture of a pheasant there, and Chong Lu's marinade that Maggie credits to Chong Lu, who I had the pleasure of working for as well. So buy Maggie's Harvest if you're bored. It's like the Bible. It's big. Anyway, I kind of know how to cook a pheasant. I hung around with her long enough, I know. There's all my junk. I'm ready to cook. So, the pheasant is all sealed off in that pot. Have a little look. But we're going to try, I'm going to try and stretch this out to as big a meal as I can. So we got some lentils. Somewhere. Pull the pheasant out and make room in your pot. If you've got a big pot, you're fine. And leave all of that junk in the bottom of the pot. That's all good flavour. Alright, get some lentils, I don't know, half a cup, something, chuck them in. And you just need to give these a bit of a kickstart. They need to get in because we're trying to do a one pot wonder, but we probably need to give the lentils a little bit of a kickstart or they won't get there. So get them under a high heat. We're just going to get them started, that's all. And then start frying off your shallot or onion, your garlic, and we'll go hard. Doesn't matter if you overcolour it, it'll all knock off. Bit of your Kangaroo Island oil. Now if you want to do this all in separate fry pans, it's fine. You can sear it all off in a fry pan. You don't have to pot roast it. You can put it on a baking, inside a baking tray or whatever, a deep baking tray. The pot roast kind of helps that it's going to keep the pheasant a little bit moist. This pheasant, just from sealing, is almost 1/3 cooked already. They're not a long cooked bird. So, you know, I'm aiming at about 20 minutes to cook the pheasant, but it'll depend on your oven. I've got the oven preheated at 180 degrees. So just colour this stuff up and look, don't worry about it too much. Just chuck it all in. Once the onion's got a little bit of glassiness to it, the rest can go in. I found some juniper, so we'll chuck that in. Just give it a little bit of a squash to get the oil out, or a mortar and pestle or whatever. But like I said, that's going to be in the gin anyway. Get your zest in, orange, lemon, whatever, or not. So I guess everyone gets a bit like, oh, where do I take this to because it's going to go to this much in the oven? Well, the answer is it doesn't really matter. If you don't seal this too much, you'll lose a bit of flavour, I guess, but you'll gain in texture in the end dish. So it doesn't really matter. This is a real hit in this sort of recipe. If it ends up that the carrots are a little crunchy or the celery is, well, good for you. But what this process in the pot does now is definitely give the whole dish a sort of more autumn sort of fawn or brown flavour. So we're kind of following that idea that it's not going to be a white flavoured dish. It's not going to be an over brown flavoured dish, just sort of like a nice fawn. If you wanted to add in some stock, you could, but honestly, you don't need to. You've got enough flavour going on. What you probably want to do is, when you finish with the pheasant, get all of the bones, pop them in a pot. If you've got any scraps left over from your vegetables or your onion and whatever, you can make a quick pheasant stock, and then you've got, it takes you maybe an hour of just simmering, and you've got quite a nice base for a little soup or something later. Alright, cooked lentils are sort of simmering. The lentils are usually 20 minutes woe to go if they're a new season harvest with no soak. So from cold, minimum amount of water, usually 4 parts water to 1 part lentil. And the reason you do that is they tend to take longer if they've got too much water. There's a whole heap of chemical rubbish about that, but they will take a little longer. Alright, so this is sort of getting some colour on it. So I think we could probably make a little room in here for the sausage. So a good pork fat content sausage, whether you want to use a chicken or a pork or whatever. I wouldn't go for too much different mad flavours in here. I wouldn't have a spicy sausage, but you're welcome if you want to. And again, just give a bit of colour to the sausage. You might want to cook it, just so it doesn't explode on you. Now, all of the hoo-ha about steam ovens and whatnot, sure, we use steam ovens. They're fancy, they're expensive, and there's a lot of junk to break in them. You've got a steam oven right here, sitting on top of the stove, because whatever moisture is in your product, if you put a lid on it, inside there, it's going to be a steam oven. So, sure, if you're a squillionaire, go and buy a fancy steam oven, but they kind of worked that stuff out years ago that if you put a lid on something, it's actually steaming inside the lid. So this is why we're using a pot roast method, that it's actually creating a little steam oven for you. And that'll help keep the bird from drying out too much. All right, I'm getting a bit burny, so it's time for a bit of gin as a deglaze. And all that's doing is lifting everything off the bottom and creating a bit of a fire. So let's put the fire out a little. And you've already got a stock in the pot, you can see. You've already got a brown stock happening. So as you look down here, that's the deglaze. It's giving you this nice dark stock with all of pheasant and vegetable catchings on the bottom of the pan. We just need a little bit more colour on the sausage and we can smack it all in. So last thing for me is the mushrooms, because they tend to suck up every last bit of oil and then give it back. And I've chucked them in last just because I didn't have really quite big enough pot for this whole thing. Salt and pepper, there was already a bit in there, but just a little top up. Alright, that sausage is, I'd probably like a little bit more colour on it, but I don't care, we'll go. As soon as all those mushrooms are coated in oil, and if you leave the sausages on the bottom of the pan, they'll catch and colour up. Now there's a whole heap of theory whether or not you should put this upright or upside down. I'm going to go upside down because it doesn't hurt to keep the breast of the bird under liquid. It doesn't hurt at all. It will help it not get too dry. And then chuck the legs in. I'll leave a little hole. The lentils should be maybe halfway there by now. Give it a bit more water. If it dries out, you can add more later. Now, make sure the lentils are down in the liquid. That's the only thing. So I'm going to go for more liquid. They're not going to cook just sitting in air. Give it a little bit of a wrap. I actually want those lentils further down because they need to be in the stock, in the pot-made stock, to be able to cook. And I want it to actually get to a really good simmer before I get it in the oven, because otherwise the lentils won't cook. So that's everything in there. And it's ready to throw into a 180 to 220, depending on how you know your oven, with a fan. So, one pot, one oven. And let's see how we go at, I don't know, we'll give it 15 and have a little looky. We'll have a poke around. You can pull, if the breasts are getting overcooked, because they're going to dry first, you just pull them out. If the legs are there, pull them out, it's fine. Just, you can pop them back into rest later. So we'll come back to you in a minute or two. Okay, so that's 20 minutes. What do we got here? Let's have a little looky. Okay, yes, cooked leg, no problem. Pull it out. Breast, perfect. Look, if it's not, just leave it. Rather than overcook it, just let it sit in there with the lid on. There's plenty of heat. Put them on your board. Now, this, just to thicken it up and to finish the lentils. The lentils are to the bite. They're quite nice. They're al dente. But I'd rather them a little more, and I'd like to thicken all of that up. It's nice, but while we're dealing with the bird, let's pop that back on the stove, and maybe the squassage can come out. And just boil it away, just reduce it down. No lid, just to thicken and to get the lentils just to the bite. So they would have been 20 minutes in a pot, but in an oven, slightly different. All right, so I said that this is a feast for two. It is. The way you should serve it is really probably joint the bird. You don't have to. but it wouldn't hurt. So find, and I want to show you the degree of cookedness on it. So you can see, it's quite nice. There's no real bloodline. It's going to be tough. You do need to rest it. So let's just leave it here. To me, that's the serve with the sausage, with even half a sausage. So you could actually, let's see if we can get 4. Depends how hungry your mum is, I guess. I maintain that 1 bird is 2 for an absolute glutton, but I reckon you can get 4 quite easily. I'd give them, say, half a sausage. That's cooked nicely. I give them 1 piece of brown meat and 1 piece of white meat. And let's see, it might be a bit mean, but that's good. That's looking nice. And the lentils are bubbling away. I'm just going to take them right down so it's really thick and sort of almost like a gravy. All right, so you should really be resting this as long as you can, but we're just pushing it along. When has it finished resting? Half the time that it took to cook is generally the rule. So that's bonus. And bonus for the 2 hungriest people get a wing as well. And then everyone gets a 1/4 of a breast. So yeah, it's a bit mean for 4. I'd say it's okay for 3. It depends how hungry you are, and you can leave the breast on the cat, whatever it's too hot to deal with. You can just cut the back of the carcass off. Because that is going to go in a stock, definitely. And there's a fair bit of, you can see there's a fair bit of breast meat on these birds. They're definitely not scabby. So we're saying half a breast. Wait. And then whoever didn't get a wing, they get all of the little bits that you can pick off the carcass. Screaming hot still, but and if you don't pick the carcass clean, it's not a huge big deal because we're going to put it in a stock and, like I said, use that for an extra soupy thing. But actually, to me, this actually looks like quite a reasonable size too. But definitely if you wanted to feed 6, I'd say if you want to be safe, get 2 birds and then you know no one will be hungry. I'm just picking out the oysters here and a bit of the brown meat. So there's not a lot of meat left on the frame now. And then that can all go into a stock pot. And make a little soupy soup. All right, let's have a look now. What do we got here? It looks pretty good to me. So we've almost kind of achieved almost a cassoulet without the right method, but with pretty much the right sentiment and ingredients. Usually a cassoulet would have a white bean and is a bit more hearty, but sort of along those lines. Now, KI will bone out the birds for you. They've got stall 17 in the central market. Have got some birds with most of the bone taken out, so you don't even have to mess around. It's got the cap with the breast on it and the legs separate, so you don't even need to use a knife if you can't be bothered, if you're lazy people. So happy Mother's Day, and be nice to our producers. They're hurting, and treat yourself to a pheasant if you haven't had one. And in the spirit of Maggie Beer, she always finishes off, what does she say? With a good flourish of olive oil. I'm making fun of you, Maggie, but you know I love you.